Hi, everybody. I'm back with you guys on How is My Financial Health Doc podcast. I have been away for a bit of time, but now I am back and enjoying recording these audios for you, the audience. This week, we're going to be talking about pensions. And the reason I'm doing one particular podcast on another pension is because there has been lots of inquiries about pensions lately. As you know, in Canada, there have been numerous pensions that have been launched, and I've been getting a lot of questions about what's the difference, what do they do, how do they differ. So this is one of those podcasts on a different type of pension plan. This is a multi-employer pension plan, but specifically on one particular type of multi-employer pension plan called a specified multi-employer pension plan. And we're going to dive into details about this, and hopefully you will enjoy understanding the difference between this, the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan, and IPPs and PPPs out there. Please enjoy.
How's my financial health, Doc? Welcome to the Financial Literacy Podcast for Healthcare Professionals, where financial security and wealth topics are not a taboo.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the show. My name is Vu Ketran, and I am the host of the How is My Financial Health Doc podcast. And today I have with me an old friend. Not that he's old, it's just that we've been friends for a long time. I'm older than he is, and he's kind of smiling right now because he knows that. So Nick is on the show with us today. So what we're going to be talking about today is different pension plans that have been marketed and advertised to the Canadian physician market, and has just been recently introduced. And as you guys know, I am the president of the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. So full disclosure of bias and conflict. I am the co-founder of the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. I currently hold the role of president. Good morning, Nick. Say hello and tell us who you are, and also if you want to disclose as well, please.
Hey, good morning, Vu. It's always great to be on here with you. So my name is Nick Giovanetti, and I've known Vu for a long time. And it's great that he's put together this amazing initiative for physicians and saving for their retirement with this Canadian Physician Pension Plan. And I do work with Vu as the head of financial planning for members of the plan and head of the insurance solutions. So excited to be here and unpack different pension opportunities out there.
Today, what we're going to be talking about is one of these pension plans that have been launched to the Canadian market, focusing on physicians. And we're going to focus on one type of plan. And this type of plan is what we call a defined benefit multi-employer pension plan. So DBMEPP standing for defined benefit multi-employer pension plan. We're going to focus the entire episode on that. And then in the future, we'll have another episode talking about DCMEPP, so defined contribution multi-employer pension plan. Are you good with that plan, Nick?
That sounds great, Boo. Yeah.
Okay, so you know what? I've thrown a lot of alphabet there and a lot of abbreviations, and I would just like to start by sort of defining what they are. So can you help us with that? Let's start with DBMEPP. What does that mean?
So an MEPP, it just stands for multi-employer pension plan. And in the type of structure, it can be either defined contribution or a defined benefit. So the defined benefit, it's a structure that allows multiple employers to participate in the same pension plan. So they can pool their resources, provide retirement benefits to the employees. And in the context of a DB, it just means it's multi-employers are multiple employers are participating in a plan, contributing based on defined benefit limits. So when you're under the age of 40, it's usually less than 18% of salary. And when you're over the age of 40, going up to age 71, it's generally more than 18% of salary, just to create a differentiator there around RSPs, which RSPs or registered retirement savings plans are 18% of salary is typically what you can put into those type of plans.
So let me add to that. So a DB defined benefit means that when I join the plan, what is defined is the benefit 30, 40 years from now. So I know the moment I join how much I'm going to get at the age of 65. So that's the defined portion, the benefit 30, 40 years from now. So people will ask, well, how do I know that? Well, because there's an actuary calculation. Smart people, actually smarter than physicians, are the people calculating this and say, based on the wind, the ocean flow, based on the market, the rate, your salary, the rate of return of the market, etc. Vu, you're 25 right now. So at 65, 40 years from now, you should be getting $1 per month. And we can sort of guarantee that by doing XYZ things. So that's the defined benefit. The MEPP, the multi-employer, is a multi-employer, multiple people, employers, bosses contribute to this. So a classic example is Hoop. So the nurses, there's different nursing association, there's different nurses from different hospitals. So those different hospitals contribute for the nurses. So those different hospitals are the employer. And because they're different and multiple, so there's multi-employer, and they contribute to the nursing pension, and it goes into one pool, correct, Nick? It's one pool.
Correct, yeah.
And so that is a strong point, but it's also a big flaw, which we'll discuss in a moment. So another example of a DBMEPP is OMERS, so the municipal workers. Another example of DBMEPP is the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, right? So all these are classic golden, like I have nothing bad to say about these plans. These plans are major attractive plans, but they do have flaws, which we're going to talk about today. Okay, so that's the DBMEPP. What is it? Oh, no, one last thing. So you mentioned before the age of 40 is less than 18%. And after the age of 40 is above 18% of salary. And it goes up by age, by tranche. So, if you're 40 to 45, it's like 20%. And after 45 is like 22%. And after that is 24%. And as you grow old to 64, 62, it goes up to almost 28, 30%. Whereas in a RRSP, it doesn't matter how old you are, it's always 18%. So that's the difference between the RRSP and a DB defined benefit multi-employer plan. So we've defined that. What about a DC multi-employer pension plan? What's the difference there?
Yeah, great question. I mean, DC defined contribution, it just means that your contribution limits are going to be different. And a defined contribution limit is limited to 18% of salary. So it's very similar to an RSP, following at 18% of salary. Although the difference is it follows 18% of current year maximum money purchase limit, whereas RSPs are following last year's. So you're always contributing sort of a year behind. On an RSP, the defined contribution is this year. And there is a big difference with defined contribution pensions versus defined benefit in the sense of what you're going to get as a predictable income, because there is no formula calculating your income stream. And you are going to be withdrawing your funds, hoping that the funds will last your lifetime. And you're going to have to kind of decide what you're going to be withdrawing every year from those type of plans.
Okay, so let me unpack that a little bit. A DCMEPP, so a defined contribution, what is defined is the contribution. We don't know what you're going to get 40 years from now. So I'm going to put in $1 here every year. I'm going to put it for the next 40 years. depending on the current of the ocean, depending on the wind, depending on the rate of the market, the returns, the fees, inflation, I have no clue what I'm going to get 40 years from now. So that's the defined contribution, which is very different from the defined benefit, because in the defined benefit, I know what I'm going to get 40 years from now. Is in the DC, what is defined is the current contribution. So I know I'm putting in $1, but how much I get later, I have no clue. So if I were to set up a multi-employer pension plan, why would I ever want to set up a DC plan for my employees? I guess for my employees, it's not a very good plan, because I put in the money now. I have no clue what's going to happen 40 years from now. But for the employer, the person actually setting up and sponsoring the plan, it's an easier administrative process, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah, it's a lot less risky for the employer as well. When you have a regular multi-employer pension plan, there's going to be monitoring of going on. There's going to be monitoring of how well the investments are performing. You're going to have to monitor ages of individuals. You're going to have to monitor payouts, performance. Like, there's a lot of administrative type of things that go along with a defined benefit multi-employer pension plan. So the defined contribution is certainly less cumbersome for the employer, and therefore easier to administer. And it takes away a lot of the risk of the future promised benefits, because there are no future promised benefits. The employer is not on the hook for what that individual is going to receive as an income stream.
Exactly, because the benefit is not defined. So they have no guarantee. They promise nothing. Vu, you can put in $1 every year for the next 40 years, and 40 years from now, if it's worth 80 cents, too bad for you, Vu, right? So that's why employers like DC multi-employer pension plans, because they quote unquote created a plan for their employer, but they guarantee nothing. And just to give you an example of what happened recently, and this is public. I'm not saying anything that is private. So I went to my banker in May, around May, April, May, and it's one of these major banks. Okay, top 5 major banks in Canada. That's who I bank with. And they were saying how the new employees hired into this bank are now going to a DC MEPP. And so they used to be a DB MEPP, and now they're a DC MEPP, and they were all unhappy about it, because obviously they contribute to the plan and it's 18%, and they have no clue what they're going to get at the end. Whereas those who were hired before May 2023, because it happened in this year, all those people who were hired before got grandfathered into the DB plan. And so moving forward, all the new hires from this bank will be on a DC plan, and they're all unhappy about it. So that's the difference between DB MEPP and DC MEPP. Don't worry, people. We're going to have another episode talking about DC MEPP later, I promise you, because there's a lot of things to unpack here.
I'll add, Vu,
yeah.
Just another quick story, because it doesn't just happen in banks. There's a major automotive manufacturer in southwestern Ontario. They have plants in Cambridge and in Woodstock, and they're owned by Toyota, called Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada. They produce Lexuses and different Toyota vehicles. They did a similar thing. They had defined benefit pension plans for their employees, and when the pressures and things get tight for an employer, the way that they can remove future risk and liability is by doing a defined contribution pension. So they'd made the switch partway through, where all new hires, you would now only be on a defined contribution style pension versus the defined benefit, like the more tenured staff. And the interesting spin that they're being told is, well, this is a good thing. You could end up with more money in retirement than somebody who has a defined benefit pension plan. And that is true, but that's a very loose what if. Again, the whole point of the security of a pension plan is to have that defined promised income benefit. Defined contribution plans are very similar to just having a group RSP, right? And how secure do people feel with group RSPs? They know that it's all on them. defined contributions are very similar. It's going to be all on you to make sure that whatever performance happens in that plan and what have you is going to be good, right? And you hope that if you're not the one responsible for picking and choosing your different funds, that the money managers are doing a great job. And we all know, can you trust the same money manager long term to perform every year, 30 years plus into retirement, to make sure that your money lasts? And so that's why defined benefits are considered the gold standard, because there's so many eyes on this plan, right? You've got actuaries looking at this plan, you got valuation reports, you have the government setting prescribed rates of return, you have portfolio managers that are mandated to perform at certain levels and allocate different asset classes inside those pensions. So for sure, defined benefits are superior.
Well, I mean, you said it. The defined benefit is the gold standard, is the benchmark. Anything below that benchmark is an inferior plan. So a DC, defined contribution MEPP, is an inferior plan to the DB plan to start with. And the DC plan, like an RSP, is targeted at 18% of salary. So in an RSP is 18% of last year's salary, whereas in a DC MEPP is 18% of this year's salary, but it's still 18%. Whether I'm 25, 45, 50, or 60 years old, it doesn't matter. It's always 18%, which doesn't make sense, because if I'm closer to retirement, I need to put more money to fund my retirement for the rest of my life, which is what a DB plan does. As people age, the percentage of salary goes up, so you can contribute more over time, so that you pad your contribution, so that you can actually live till you die, and your pension plan never runs out and depletes. And so if someone wanted a plan, if I'm Vuket Tran, automotive worker, or I work for a bank, I definitely want a DB MEPP. I do not want a DC MEPP. If I wanted a DC MEPP, I might as well just do a group RSP. And you and I know, Nick, what an RSP have and what it can do and cannot do. Mostly what it cannot do.
And to unpack that again, sorry, Boo, we're going on a bit of a tangent here, but just to put numbers in perspective, the maximum contribution room based on previous year's salary this year, if you were at the highest money purchase limit, is $30,780. So if I'm trying to max out my RSP contribution room from last year's income, I can put $30,780 in. But if I was in a defined benefit pension plan and I was 64 years old, let's say, the percentage of salary is almost 30%. So I can put in over 50,000. It's a little over 51,000 of a contribution. So when you think like dollars in, dollars out, that's a lot more dollars going in. And this is where defined benefit pension plans understand that to provide predictable income streams that promise benefits for people throughout the rest of their life when they're retiring, they're combating things like inflation and longevity and all types of other variables that they want to pay attention to. So, an example would be 40 years ago, $100 had the purchasing power of $270 today. So when you think about that, you think, man, I probably needed to save a lot more money to be able to ride that wave for 40 years of $100 40 years ago being the equivalent of $270 today.
Well, something as easy as this. I remember when I was a young kid, I would buy a bottle of Coke for 50 cents. Now a bottle of Coke is almost $5. If you go to the theaters, it's $20 for a bottle of Coke. So inflation does eat up your purchasing power, for sure. So now that we've defined MEPP, the different components, DB and DC, let's talk about something that the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan, we do. What do? We do IPPs and PPPs. So how's that different from the MEPP? I don't want to spend too much time on that. I just want to make sure that the audience know the difference in structure.
Yeah, so the biggest difference is, the very first letter of an IPP, it's an individual pension plan. Now, a PPP is actually a combination IPP, or a combination individual pension plan. The key here is that you have an individual business can sponsor their individual pension plan. You can have a pension plan of one, which is very unique. And that came out in the 90s, and the PPP or combination structure came out in the 2000s. So what's really interesting about this is your practice, your medical or medicine professional corp can sponsor your one individual's pension plan, and you are also the owner of that company. So you're a connected person and can make decisions based on your pension plan by yourself without having to have the involvement of multiple other employees or employers. And you can create family structures. So, eventually you could have your spouse added to your pension plan. You could have your children, if they work for your company, added to your pension plan. And then there's some potential intergenerational wealth benefits that way. So the key there is that it's an individual person's company sponsoring their own pension plan.
Got it. Now, I just want to point out that these are on, in the case of the IPP, is on a defined benefit structure only, which is great, by the way, because we said how much we love the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, the fact that they're on a DB structure. The PPP is on a DB structure and a DC structure and an AVC structure. So the PPP actually has three buckets. But the most important bucket is the DB bucket, not a DC. So a DB bucket. So the IPP, great product. The PPP, amazing product. Sorry, I have to say that because I'm the president. But just declare my conflict right here now. But both of these plans are DB plans as a core. Okay, and because they're a DB plan, they function the same as what you talked about. The contribution limits increases with age. The difference here, and I want to point out the difference, in a MEPP, all the employers put their money into one pool, whereas in the IPP and the PPP, the employer contributes to also one pool, which is the pool that is sponsored by the MPC. And so the family members and the spouse and the children all contribute to that one pool, but that one pool is only for this MPC. It's not for Nick, it's not for Bob, it's not for Julia, it's only for Vu and the spouse and the children. Okay, now I'm sure the audience will ask, but hold on, my spouse is not a physician and my children are not physicians, and this is existing in an MPC. I mean, that's a fair question. We can tackle that later on a different podcast. Let's to say that if your spouse works within your MPC because she's doing administrative work, she's doing receptionist, she's managing your office, managing your practice, that's how she can be part of your MPC, and same for your children. And I just want to point out that IPPs and PPPs were not created for physicians. They were created for small business. So Nick, what other small business can benefit from these?
Yeah, great question, Boo. Really, any. So I could be an individual that has a decking business. My brother-in-law is a woodworker and has a carpentry business. He has a corporation. He could set up an individual pension plan or personal pension plan for himself and for his family. My sister working for the company could be added as a plan member to the pension. The company could make contributions on her behalf as another employee of the company. So it's really anybody: chiropractors, dentists, small, medium business owners that own a computer company, right? We've all seen those, those computer repair companies. I'm sure they have a corporation behind the scenes. So it's very, very lucrative. Even one that gets forgotten is franchisees.
Absolutely.
Owners.
I was going to say that. Mom and pop who owns a Tim Hortons franchise, or mom and pop who owns a McDonald's franchise. So a friend of mine actually owns 3 or 4 McDonald's. Like, he's a franchisee and he owns 3 or 4 McDonald's restaurants. Obviously, he doesn't own it in his own name. He owns it under a corporation. and his wife is also the administrator. She manages the books, and the children manages other things. So, as the owner of his company, his corporation that owns 3-4 McDonald's, well, he sponsors a pension plan for both himself, his wife, and his children, who all work inside this corporation to run the business of McDonald's, 3-4 McDonald's restaurant. So IPPs and PPPs are a perfect solution for small business owners. And it could be any small business owner. We just talked about mechanic, deck, woodworking, and now, believe it or not, it has been extended to real estate agents, right? Accountants, lawyers, CFP like yourself, Nick, if you've incorporated your own practice, and consultants and physicians, dentists, nurse practitioners, by the way, fall into this category as well. The nurses have hoop, but the nurse practitioners can set up their own IPPs and PPPs as well. So, okay, so now we've defined all these structures. Now, let's focus on one. This is the focus of the podcast. We're going to focus on the DBMEPP, which is the Defined Benefit Multi-Employer Pension Plan. So one of these plans have been launched into the market recently, again, quote unquote, focusing on physicians. I want to point out one thing, Nick, and you're going to have to explain this to us and to me as the audience. They are not exactly an MEPP. They are a SMEPP. So the S stands for a specified multi-employer pension plan. So now this adds another level of complexity. What does the specified mean here?
Yeah, the specified, it's unique because it means that they're changing the structure a little bit. So they're saying that they're going to provide a defined benefit income, promised benefit income in the future, but they were able to change the funding of that particular pension. So they're funding the pension on the defined contribution limits, which anybody that was listening earlier knows that this is going to be significantly less money than what is truly required to have a healthy, secure, stable, defined benefit pension plan in the future. A specified multi-employer pension plan, really the administrators, they have the legal power to reduce pension benefits, right? This means that there's a risk to whoever is in a pension plan like that. There's a risk to that promised defined benefit pension because there is a chance you may not be fully paid out in retirement if there's not enough assets in the plan.
Okay, so let me just backstep a little bit and understand why you said that. You said that because even though it is a DBMEPP, so a defined benefit multi-employer plan, it is a specified, and because it is specified, it does not use the defined benefit structure. It uses the DC limit structure. So even though it is a quote unquote on the surface a defined benefit plan, functionally it behaved like a DC plan. Tell us why that is. What happened here? Why legally, structurally are they behaving like a DC plan?
The complexity of having a true defined benefit pension plan, it's time consuming and it requires really specialized knowledge. So some employers prefer to opt for these specified multi-employer plans because the employer doesn't have the responsibility anymore of some of these features that defined benefit pension plans require, like special payments, for example. This is an opportunity where one can put in more money if the pension plan is underperforming to make sure the promised benefit is delivered. They don't have to track different ages. They don't have to manage those deficits and surpluses. So it's really why one would opt for a specified multi-employer plan is because the administrator of that plan is looking for ease, simplicity, and lack of responsibility.
Okay, so there's one more that you didn't mention is the idea of terminal funding. So a specified multi-employer pension plan, even though they are a DB plan, they don't have the capacity of doing terminal funding. Now, don't worry, people in the audience land, don't need to worry about what terminal funding really is. It's just one feature of defined benefit plans. But terminal funding is a mechanism by which a employer, i.e., the MPC in the case of a physician, can put in more money to boost up and sort of buffer their plan when they want to do early retirement. Because as we're doing early retirement, there's not enough money in the plan, so therefore there's an opportunity to buffer that before you start taking the pension. And as MPCs buffer that and contributes, then the MPC takes a massive tax write-off that year. And so DB plans have that capability, except in this DB SMEP, they can't. Even though they're a DB plan, they can't do it because they are specified. So there are a few things that even though they call themselves a DB, functionally they can't. It's like a platelet, to be honest. So we all know there's thrombocytopenia. So there's a low platelet, so they don't function very well. But we also know that there are people who have normal platelets, but because of whatever circumstance, the platelets don't function very well. So it's like having very low platelets anyways. So functionally, even though they are a DB plan, they don't function like a DB plan. They function like a DC plan. Okay, so now let's go into the discussion, and I want to talk about the pros and cons of these plans. Let's just start with the pros. I heard you say multiple times, these are easy to manage, easy for the administrator. For the administrator, easy to manage. They don't have to calculate special payments. They don't have to take into account a physician's age, a physician's salary. They don't care about where the wind blows. They don't care about the ocean current. It's a very fixed plan that is easy for the sponsor to do. So when that happens, it translates to lower fees for the individual. So am I correct in saying that? So because this is a DB SMEP plan, me as physician, if I want to join this plan, it will cost me less, I hope.
Yeah, generally speaking, specified multi-employer plan is potentially going to cost less. The big difference there is one of the unique features of having a pension plan set up for yourself is that there are fees associated. There's going to be filing with CRA, administrative compliance, actuarial costs. There's different things that go on with pension plans. Even though there are some fees there, relatively, if they're small or a little bit more, the individual's corporation can generally write off those fees as an expense. When you have certain types of pensions out there, like certain specified multi-employer plans, the fees might be embedded and very hard to see, very hard to track. So even though they might be lower, you won't have an opportunity to write those off. And that can be a negative in the sense of, okay, if I know my fees, and even if they are slightly higher, but I can write those off and save taxes on that money, am I really not further ahead than one that is maybe a slightly lower fee, but it's embedded and I can't write it off?
So, okay, so that's a good point. But I don't want to address that right now because we'll address it later. But just on the surface, if I want to join this DB SMEP, the sticker price, when you go to buy a car, there's a sticker price on the car, it's 40,000, and you look at that and say, wow, it's 40,000, and then when you pay, it ends up being 52 because you forgot to add the tax and you forgot to add the environmental tax and the tire
Freight.
tax and the freight and PDI, right? But the sticker price is 42,000. So the sticker price for this DB SMEP is lower than if I were to set up an IPP PPP, right? That I think
Generally speaking, yeah, I would imagine it would be lower.
Yeah. So strictly speaking, that would be lower. But what the definition that you gave, or not the definition, but the qualification you gave, is when you take into account all the freight, PDI, environmental tax, tire tax, blah, 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 actually, at the end of the day, the IPP and PPP will end up being less. And we'll explain that later. Okay. So what you're getting to, and I want to make sure the audience understand this, because I come across this every single time. People are fixated on the sticker price. What they don't realize is all the hidden fees and the hidden benefits, which at the end of the day, we should not be looking at price. We should be looking at value. So we're going to talk about value later, but we're going to talk about even the sticker price later. So one benefit, at least on the surface, it seems to cost less. What are other benefits? If I wanted me, Dr. Vu Ket Tran, MPC, if I wanted to join this DB SMEP, what are other pros?
I would say that benefits are that you do have a potential to be putting in 18% of salary and receive a defined benefit level of income stream. There is that potential. If everything works out, it could end up costing you less in terms of contribution. So you're putting in less money and you might receive a defined benefit pension out of it. Now, I'll just asterisk that. When you're in one of these type of plans, there are things that they're hoping for if they're ever underperforming. And some of those things can include just that plan members pass away early. So they're hoping that there's going to be some extra money in there from people who don't have long lives, and they just kind of replenish the pool, right, to support those plan members who do. And that can be a difficult thing to swallow, in the sense of it's a structure not banking on, but potentially calculating out mortality risk to the security of their pension plan, where other pensioners, other physicians might support your pension having shorter lives.
There's a lot of things to unpack, but I just want to make sure I give this plan a fair shake. So let's just give them everything positive for now, and we'll talk about the negatives after. Okay, because the point you mentioned is extremely important, but we are in the portion of the podcast where I'm shining a light on them and give them positive. So let's give them a fair shake first. The other pro and benefit is because administratively it's easier for them. The paperwork for me should be easier too, right? So if Dr. Vu Ket Tran wants to sign up to this plan, there's not that much paperwork. You know, here's some papers, here's point A, point B, sign on this dotted line, Vu Ket Tran, and off I go to the races, right? Administratively, paperwork should be less as well. Am I correct?
I would think that it would be less. Yeah. And I'll sort of preface your earlier comment. Inherently, as a planner, I always go pros, cons. So it's always hard for me to say a pro without also saying the con, because it's the balance of the thought.
I know.
Our thoughts.
I know. But in this podcast, I'm trying to deliver information in somewhat a cogent way for people to understand. So let's give all the pros first. I want to be fair. So the other pro is that this is professionally managed. I'm Vu Ket Tran. I'm working long hours. I'm working. Oh my God, I'm burning out. I'm taking care of patients. I'm coming home. I have family to deal with. I've got the New England to read. I've got the JAMA to read. And I've got this new podcast I need to listen to. And by the way, I need to listen to Vu's podcast. Like, when am I going to have time to manage my own money? I don't want to. So, but there are smart people who's going to manage my money, and it's professionally done. So yeah, that's a big plus, because these are people who know what they're doing, and they're managing money for a whole bunch of doctors. So hopefully they'll do a good job for me.
I would hope so. I mean, Canadians are very trusting of big banks. And so if one of the top 5 banks is saying that we're going to professionally manage your solutions for you, there generally is some comfort around that. And that is something that I believe these pension plans out there are trying to trying to hit that nerve with a busy physician is that you are busy. You might be working, 80% full work at a clinic and 80% at a merge or whatever. You guys are working crazy amounts of hours, and COVID certainly extended your workload. So anything that can be taken off your plate is going to be appealing.
And I have no doubt. I have no doubt that these money managers, these big banks, I have no doubt that they'll do a good job because they have very smart people working for them in the back end, right? They have actuaries, they have insurance specialists, they have CFAs, that stands for Certified Financial Analyst. So they analyze the market, from A to Z and Z to A and back to Z again. So these are very smart people. So I have no doubt that they're going to do a good job. The fourth one, which I think people don't really realize, that it is a pension plan. So it's a registered pension plan. So they're actually creditor protected. It's really, really hard to touch someone's pension plan. Now, someone can touch your RSP and take it away from you if you get into a lawsuit, but nobody can touch your pension plan. So being creditor protected is an amazing thing.
It is. There's a lot of peace of mind in that, knowing that you've got the highest level of creditor protection, generally speaking, in Canada. Very hard for creditors to get at anybody's pension, even if you're a pensioner of a Hoop or OMERS or Teachers or any of these other flagship Canadian pension plans.
Another pro that I think, well, obviously it's a pension plan that my MPC contributes. So my MPC gets a good tax write-off, right? So it's a good strategy to reduce taxable income within my MPC. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think with this type of structure, you're contributing at 18% of the money purchase limit. So it is a contribution from the MPC, which is great, but it's going to be, again, this is just my pro-con nature. It's going to be a similar contribution to what you would have made with an RSP on the personal side.
Correct, because it's capped. It's capped at around 30,000 and something.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about that as well in a minute when we talk about the cons, because it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. So we'll describe why that is a bad thing. One last good thing: it is a good pension plan. No doubt it is a good pension plan because it is one of those where I can say I bought it and I leave it, right? And I have peace of mind. And for the next 30, 40 years, someone's taking care of the investments for me. Someone's taking care of the administrative stuff for me. All I need to do is report to the CRA on a simple piece of paper and I'm done. It's simple and I've got a safe retirement pension plan. For the busy physician, this is amazing. So I have absolutely nothing bad to say about that. That is a very good buy it and leave it type of plan.
Yeah, it can be great. I mean, you can focus on your zone of genius, which is medicine, and you can allow a team to look after the investments of your pension plan. So yes, it can be great.
So we now both agree on the pros. Now let's dissect it a little bit. Okay. And when I say dissect, let's try to find out where the weaknesses are. Okay. And there are in every plan. And please, the audience, I want people to know there are pros and cons, and there are strengths and weaknesses in all plans. There are strengths and weaknesses in the RSP, in the IPP, in the PPP, in the CPPP, in the DBMEPP, and in the DCMEPP. Nothing is foolproof, nothing is guaranteed, and nothing is the best. So there are pros and cons in each. So now that I've made sure I specify that, let's just talk about the weaknesses of this particular program. So particularly we're talking about the defined benefit SMEP, specified multi-employer pension plan. So let's just go. There are 7, at least, that you and I have thought about. So let's go through one by one. And the points that you've pointed out earlier will come back again, but we'll dissect it and dive a little bit deeper into it. So the first one is potential reduction of promised benefits. So the DB plan is supposed to promise you something because it takes into account actuarial calculation. When I set up the plan, I know exactly 40 years from now what I'm going to get. And so that's what it's supposed to do. But in a SMEP, it actually doesn't do that, because in a SMEP, even though it's a DB plan, it functions like a DC plan. So what happened here, Nick?
Yeah, so the massive amount of risk here is that if there's not enough assets in the plan, these pensions are legally allowed to reduce and lower your retirement income as a plan participant, and you would have no control over that. You could not stop it. You couldn't add more money to it. You can't do anything. So from a risk perspective, it's difficult. We can't avoid all risk, but we want to at least have the ability to counteract that risk somehow. And to not even have the ability to do anything about it can be very hard to swallow.
Let me just unpack that a little bit and put it into layman's terms, and correct me, Nick, if I'm wrong. So let's say I've signed on to this DB SMEP plan today, and I'm, 35 years old, and I sign on to this plan, and I'm going to contribute until I'm 65, so the next 30 years. And my plan says that when I retire at age 65, I will get $120,000 every year. That's what the plan says. The market goes up, goes down, the ocean current goes sideways, and the wind goes sideways, and whatever. And then 30 years from now, the plan is not as strong. And when I say the plan, I mean the pool money, the one pool. The pooled money is not as strong as we thought. So instead of me at age 65 getting the $120,000 per year that I was promised, the plan may say, I'm sorry, Vu, the plan is not very strong. We don't have enough money. We're only going to give you $70,000 this year and every year for the next, until you die. So instead of giving you $120,000, we're only going to give you $70,000, $75,000, $80,000, whatever it is based on their calculation. And me as Vu Ket Tran can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and I think it going down to 70 would be extreme, but yes, I mean they could come to you and say you don't get 120, Dr. Tran. We underperformed. There's too much longevity of plan members, and the assets are just not providing what we thought they would provide. So we're going to give you 105,000.
So that number is obviously calculated based on age, mortality, blah 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 blah, and what's left in the pool. But the point is, what you're saying is, when they tell me it's 105 or when they tell me it's 100, I can't do anything about it.
No, there's no provision there where you can top it up. So true defined benefit pension plans, they have something called special payments. I'll unpack it a little bit, where the CRA monitors defined benefit pensions, and they have what's called a prescribed rate of return. And they allow defined benefits to contribute more money than that 18% of salary, because they know that the longevity risk and inflation and all these things need to be combated, and it takes money. If you have a defined benefit pension plan, like say an individual pension plan or what have you, and your assets are not performing at what CRA says is the prescribed rate, meaning like the basement number, which is 7.5% on average, your MPC, your company, you can put more money in to counteract against that low performing pension fund. You can put more money in.
Only in an IPP and PPP.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Not in the SMEP.
Not in the SMEP, no. Because the SMEP is following an 18% contribution limit as a maximum. And there's none of these special payment opportunities for underfunding. It's relying on other things. When I say that you can't do anything about it, it's like all pension plans have an opportunity to underperform. But if you're in a pension plan that allows you to at least put more money in, or there's a functionality there to help counteract that, then you have less risk.
So I'm going to put it in a medical term for my audience, okay? So here it is. We all know the benefit of warfarin, and we all know the benefit of these new anticoagulants. But people bleed, right? That's the risk. And one of the ways to combat it is to give a reversal agent. Everything we do in medicine, there's a risk. but hopefully there's a reversal agent. Now, people argue, Vu, the reversal agent does not increase survival and people still die and blah blah blah. I get it, but there's still a reversal agent, so there's something to be done about it. In this SMEP, there's nothing to be done about it. If the pool says we're no longer giving you 120, we're only giving you 100, 105, 70, that's it. In the IPP and PPP, you can actually do something about it. So it's the equivalent of that reversal agent. So in an IPP and PPP, you can actually do something about it. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, we mentioned administrative simplicity, okay? But we're going to now talk about administrative complexity. Wait a minute, Vu, you're talking through both sides of your mouth. Why did you say it's simple and now you're saying it's complex? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so complex, like in a true defined benefit multi-employer plan, removing that specified or that S, the employer is responsible for those things like special payments, topping up underperforming funds, can involve complex administrative processes. You've got to track age, manage deficits, manage surpluses. They're not necessarily a negative. I mean, that's what I would want from my pension plan. The issue with too simple, when you remove all that complexity, the administrator of your pension, they're saying, we don't want to be consumed by time from monitoring all of these fail safes or reversal agents in the medical space. We don't want to bother with that. So we don't even want the specialized knowledge really of trying to counteract that. So the way they avoid that is by having a specified multi-employer plan, follow defined contributions, and just hope it all works out. Right? It's sort of like driving down, for anybody from the GTA. We know the 400 series highways. I could probably drive down those highways without a seatbelt and be perfectly fine. Drive 120, 130, whatever, doesn't matter. I would be okay. The problem is that if something complex happens, somebody in front of me gets in an accident, there's water on the road and I hydroplane a little bit, anything outside of my control happening, I'm probably going to go through the windshield and I'm not going to live. That's, in my mind, what I think of when I think of a pension plan that wants to avoid all of those complexities. They're removing all the fail safes like a seatbelt.
So let me tie this back. Why I said that the SMEP is administratively simple, but then now I say it's complex. No, what I'm saying is a regular MEPP. So, for example, the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, HOOP, OMERS, they are true DB MEPPs. Those are massive undertaking. And it's massive undertaking, and it's amazing because all the fail-safe and all the boundaries are there. What happens with these SMEP, these specified MEPPs, they remove all the fail-safe. They remove all the mechanism to protect you. For example, the special payment. For example, the terminal funding. For example, the monitoring. For example, the prescribed rate of 7.5%. All those monitoring and barriers that were supposed to keep your pension safe, they removed it because they went to a DC plan instead, even though they're called a DB plan. So it is administratively simpler for the administrator, i.e. this company. It's also simpler for me to sign up, right? All I have to do is sign on the dotted line. It makes my life as Vu Quét Tran so much easier. But I don't realize that all the fail-safe has been removed. And so while it is simpler for the administrator, it's really not good for Vu Quét Tran, because Vu Quét Tran, if Vu Quét Tran hits that pot of water that you mentioned in hydroplanes, I'm going through the window. And so it's easy for the 400 series highway to say, hey, you can drive without your seatbelt, no problem. But should I do that as Vu Quét Tran? I probably not. Okay, so that's point number.
I'll add to that, Vu. Relate it back to medicine. When is it advisable when it comes to healthcare to always take the simpler, less complex route?
Never. So some things, okay, let me say my never with a qualifier. If the simpler route is simple and safe, and has reasonable risk of complication, then simple it is. But if simple, but too much risk, too much potential for things going bad, then it's not okay. Why would I want to take from point A to point C to point D to point D to point F if I can just go from point A to point B to F? But if I did that and I'm going through a swamp and there are alligators and falling rocks and I'm going to fall off a cliff, it doesn't matter how easy it is. I'm not going to take that route. Same thing in medicine, and same thing in finance, and same thing in pensions. If you make it easy for me, that is amazing. That is very good. But if you make it easy to the point that now I, Vu Ketran, the individual, have to take on all the risk, I don't want that.
Well, and I'll unpack that further. Like, it's okay to have extremely complex finances. Like, as people grow their wealth, they get all kinds of things. They have trusts, they have cross-border stuff, they have unique assets, they have tax issues. But to the individual, it's good to try and simplify. Like, if I'm going in for surgery, I don't need to know everything that's going to go on. I would like to just show up, put my gown on, lay on a bed, go to sleep, wake up, and they tell me how I'm going to feel better. I would like it to be simple for me, the user. But I want all the professionals that are doing things for me behind the scenes not to be taking the easy route. And we do that in finance a lot. As a CFP, this is something we focus on, simplifying everything for who we're working with, but we're not taking the simplified easy route. We're making sure that it's done right, and we're trying to mitigate risk. And when we talk pension plans, there's fail safes there for a reason. We don't want to sidestep them and skip them, because that's just simplifying me, the professional's life, not your life. That's actually making your life a lot riskier.
Well, I want to come back to your analogy of surgery. You, as the individual going for surgery, you just want to put your gown on, speak to the anesthetist, and then fall asleep. And then when you wake up, your appendix is out, right? That's what you want, right? But on the back end, you expect us, the anesthetist, the surgeons, the nurse, to do whatever we need to do to not leave gauze in your belly, right?
Yeah.
So that you walk away and you go
washing
home.
your hands.
That's right. That I wash my hands. That the anesthetist has, all the back and fail safe, right? And that when you go home, there's not a scalpel left in your belly, right? That's what you want. So you want the most complex stuff on the back end so that you, as the individual, go into surgery feeling safe and knowing that you don't have to worry about someone leaving a gauze in your belly. This is the same. Like, if you make it administratively easy for me, that's great. That's perfect. But on the back end, I also need you to make sure that you've done everything possible so that I feel comfortable in that ease of administration. But if you remove the special payments, you remove the terminal funding, you remove all that, it means that all of a sudden I potentially have a gauze in my belly when I walk home. And should I, as the individual, wake up and check that, make sure there's no gauze in my belly before you close me up? No, that's not my job. That's your job. And so when you simplify it to the point where it's very, very simple, but it's risky, and I'm the one having to check, and I'm the one having to verify all that because you didn't put the fail safe. I don't care how administratively simple it is not in my best interest.
That's right. And it's not your responsibility to simplify the professional's life. It's our responsibility to make sure we're efficient, but not removing safety checks. We're not removing things that are there to protect you.
Exactly. So point number 3, lack of flexibility in investment options. What do we mean by that?
Generally, participants don't have a lot of flexibility in choosing the investments when they're part of that type of a pension, like a specified multi-employer. I mean, there's going to be something there to your individual risk tolerance and your financial goals. But lack of flexible investment options, it'll be determined by the administrator. Lots of times they're looking for things known in the industry as modeling or model portfolios. So it's very easy for them to administer again. They just maybe look at it every 6 months and tweak things as necessary. But generally, they follow guidelines and they want to take a lot of the thought out of it. So when I meet with a physician like yourself, Boo, I'm going to perform a typical risk tolerance that most investors are very familiar with, and I'm going to have a one of four choices or one of five choices. I don't want to assume to know all their choices, but generally, if they're looking for administratively simplified processes, they're going to look for simplified investment processes as well.
So let's jump to point number 4, potential fees and expenses. And I would go as far to say hidden fees and expenses. And I will go as far as to say, even though it's less costly overall, remember we talk about the sticker price? It's less costly from a superficial perspective, but it actually adds less value. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Potential costs associated with these plans can be administrative fees, investment fees. And we all know just from anybody that's done any research on investing that, fees eat away your overall returns and performance. And when there's not as much transparency around it or embedded costs or no opportunity to deduct those fees or expenses as a business expense. And what I mean by deduct is your company's putting the money in. If there's fees associated with it and I'm able to deduct them, I want to know what they are. Like, it's okay. I got to pay fees for professionals to do work. At least allow me to deduct it. So a negative could be that you're just not aware of all the underlying embedded stuff and you just won't be able to deduct it.
So I'm going to unpack that a little further and I'll put some numbers to it. So in a MEPP or in a SMEPP, it doesn't matter. It takes a team to administer this whole plan, right? It takes a CEO, it takes a CFO, it takes a COO, it takes a whole bunch of analysts, advisors, lawyers, accountants, etc. Those have cost. And so if we are pulling, so I'm pulling my money, Nick, you're pulling your money, Bob, Julia, we're all putting our money into this pool and they manage this pool, there are administrative fees. So let's just say this pool has $100 in it. Okay, that's all the money we put in. Well, when you minus the fees come off the top. So let's assume the fees are $200. So we now have $1,000 into this pool, but we have to pay the CEO, the CFO, the CEO, the blah, 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 and all those people. The $200 come off the top. So we're not investing $1,000, we're investing $800, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is this $200 is inside the overall expenditure of this pool of this company. Nothing says that Vu paid 50 cents. And nothing says that Nick pays 75 cents. And there's no way to track to say that Bob paid $1. So because there's no tracking of sort, we can't deduct it. So even though my MPC put in $10 into this pool and I actually paid 50 cents in cost, it cannot be tracked to me. So I put in my $10 and the 50 cents that I actually paid, it's hidden, but I actually paid it. I can't track it. And if I can't track it, I can't deduct it from my MPC's income. So that's the problem with MEPPs. Now, inside an IPP and PPP, everything is tracked. If my MPC pays $10 and the cost of the administration of Vu's IPP or PPP is 50 cents, I get an invoice or receipt at the end. It says, Vu, your MPC paid 50 cents. So I take that 50 cents and minus my income, my corporation's income. So even though the sticker price for an IPP and PPP are a bit higher than an MEPP, everything's tracked and everything could be deducted as a business expense because the entity contributing to the pension is actually my MPC. So it's an expense to my MPC. So not only I get better service, I get all the fail-safe, I get an exact DB plan, I actually get to deduct the contribution, right? So I know I pay more upfront, but I get it back at the end. So in terms of cost, it actually may be less costly, maybe. Okay, maybe. It's a big maybe. But at the end of the day, even though I'm paying, I don't know, $500 more, $300 more, $600 more, whatever it may be, the value outweighs the cost. The benefit outweighs the cost. So it's actually more value in paying more. And the way I think about this is this, right? I know that a Mercedes-Benz costs more than a Kia. Well, that's at maybe a few years ago. Now everything's more expensive. And if I wanted a Kia EV6, it's at least 56 grand, and I have to wait 3 years for it. So maybe it's as expensive as a Mercedes-Benz. But you get my analogy, right? The Mercedes-Benz have more power, more performance, more horsepower, more technology, better German engineering, more safety components, but it costs more, right? So if I value those items, I'm ready to pay for Mercedes-Benz and not a Lada and not a Kia, right? So it doesn't mean that a Mercedes-Benz is for everybody. And it doesn't mean that a Kia is for everybody. Everybody have to choose what they like and tolerate what they don't like, right? So it's not just a sticker cost that people need to be worried about. What people need to worry about is value.
Exactly. Very well said. And just think, even running your MPC right now, you track everything. Probably track your office expenses, your staff. Like the list is endless. Could have advertising, bank service charges, OMA fees, depreciating things, credit card expense, fuel, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. You want to track all that stuff. You're spending it to run your practice, but I still want to know what I'm spending and I can deduct it off my income.
Right. And so I'm already paying OMA fees. I'm already paying CPSO fees. I'm also paying CFPC fees, and I'm also paying CMA fees. When my MPC contributes to this pension, it's another fee. And I should be able to know what it is, and I should be able to deduct it. But if you're in an MEPP, it's not tracked that way. You'll never know, and you'll never be able to deduct it. Point number 5. This one is, I think, in my mind, the most important. You cannot pass wealth to your beneficiary through a MEPP. Let's deep dive into this and explain why.
Yeah, no, I won't use the word cannot, but I will say that there's a lot of limitations when passing wealth. So in the case of MEPPs and specified MEPs, there's the SMEPs that are not defined benefit plans. There may be limitations in passing to beneficiaries on a tax deferred basis, and it can restrict the ability to transfer wealth to future generations just efficiently. So when you think, okay, maybe I'm working away, I have a spouse, I have children, I can name my spouse as a beneficiary to my pension if I have one of these specified multi-employer pensions. Let's say that I want to name my spouse as a beneficiary. Generally, we have what's called a guarantee period. So if I have a shortened life expectancy, my family is going to receive some of this money, my spouse in this case. Generally speaking, in a SMEP, there is a 5-year guarantee if I name a spouse. So meaning if I live past 5 years, there really is no promised benefit to the SMEP, to the spouse. If I don't name my spouse as a beneficiary, generally speaking, you'll have something like 15 years. Let's assume that I don't name my spouse because I want to extend it or I do, whatever. But I pass away at year 20, let's say. My spouse has predeceased me and I just have children left. I'm past my guarantee period. I might still have assets in the pool. I probably do. Maybe it's a few $100,000, maybe it's $1 million. But now that I've passed away 20 years into retirement, maybe I'm only 80. All of that money is not going to pass to the next generation. If I had passed away early into retirement, say year 3, and there was some leftover funds there, that could have passed to the next generation. But if it goes to the children, it's going to be taxed generally in their hands, right? And whatever marginal tax rate they're in. There's no way to shelter it or defer it any further. So there's risk there in the sense of I have no way to name children on the plan and shelter, and I have limited time frame where my spouse is going to be looked after if I don't live a long life.
So this comes from how it is structured. So in a MEPP or even in a SMEP, remember we said that it's one pool. So it's one pool of money for Vuket Tran, Nick, Bob, Julia, Vincent, whoever it is, the 30,000 doctors in Ontario, the 70,000 doctors in Canada, assuming we all join this MEPP. So when Vuket Tran passes away, and there's no spouse because either I'm not married or because my spouse passed before me, or we both died at the same time driving down to Florida because we're snowbirds, whatever. So if that happens, the remaining dollars that were unused for Vuket Tran's pension is a pension surplus that goes back to the pool. It goes back to the pool to the other 30,000 doctors, assuming we're past that guarantee period, okay? So the money goes back to the pool for the other 30,000 doctors. It doesn't go to Vuket Tran's son or daughter.
Or estate.
Or estate. The reason for that is because it is one pool. Now, what's the difference for an IPP and PPP? Well, it is still one pool for Vuket Tran and family. It is one pool for Bob and family. It is one pool for Julie and family. That is 3 separate pools that I just mentioned, right? It's not one common pool. So if Vuket Tran passes away, the money goes back to the pool for Vuket Tran's wife and children. If Bob passes away, it goes back to the pool for Bob, spouse, and family. If Julie passes away, it goes back to the pool for Julie and family. And all 3 pools are separate. That's how money can be passed from generation to generation. Now, I must put a caveat. It has to be set up appropriately. It has to be compliant with CRA, of course, right? But there's that potential of doing it. Whereas in a MEPP, there is absolutely no legal structure that allows you to do that.
Well, and I'll unpack one little piece as well when you're talking all these different pools. So Vuket Tran sets up an individual pension plan or a personal pension plan, and he has his pool of money. If something happens to Dr. Vuket Tran, this money does not evaporate. There is no common pool for this money to just be absorbed in. And a lot of people have seen that. If they have friends, family members, loved ones who have passed away and they were firefighters, teachers, police, what have you, there are periods of time where that money just kind of evaporates. It gets absorbed by this larger pool. There is no pool to absorb this money. It's going to either flow back to Dr. Vuket Tran's company and be dispersed to the beneficiaries that way, or it flows to his estate and goes to the beneficiaries that way. There might be taxed at different levels, but the money is not going to just evaporate.
Well, no, even further to that, Nick, if that pool of money, if that pension is a family pension, it's Bob, Bob's wife, Bob's children, and Bob's grandchildren. Bob is dead, but the children are not, and they're still in that pension pool. The money goes to the children. And if the children pass away, the grandchildren are still in that pension pool. So the money goes to the grandchildren. Never have left the pension. So therefore, tax deferred continuously.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Vu. So yes, if we add those extra family members at some point to the plan as plan members, they work for the company at some point, they have T4, we can add them. But I'm talking even if you never did, even if Vuket Tran never added his children to his plan,
it goes back to the court.
Yeah, the money doesn't just disappear.
Correct. Whereas in an MEPP, it actually does disappear.
It could, yeah.
So that's why IPPs or PPPs are an ideal solution for professionals, because we're not teachers, we're not part of a pool. We actually have an MPC. Dentists actually have a DPC. Lawyers have an LPC. Real estate now, I don't know what it's called, but they also have their corporation. And mom and pop who owns a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise have their corporation. So the money stays within the family as opposed to going back to the other 30,000 people. And so that's why an MEPP, that is their major weakness. Point number 6, these SMEPs are funded on a DC limit, even though their sticker says DB. We talked about that already. So we don't need to rehash that. This last one. So MEPPs and SMEPs are registered with the province and are locked in. What does that mean?
Yeah, so let's unpack that. When you register an individual pension plan or personal pension plan, let's just talk Ontario, and you own at least 10% or more of the sponsoring company, which is going to be your MPC, and you're going to most likely own more than 10% of the shares of that MPC, you're considered what's called a connected person to your pension, which means that an IPP or PPP doesn't have to be registered with the province, the Pension Benefit Act in Ontario. So if for whatever reason, I want to wind up my pension, I want to get out of this thing, and I want to go back to RSPs, I can go back to regular, unlocked, registered retirement savings plans. And I might have some sort of a tax event when I do that, because pensions can put more money in it than an RSP. But the key is it's not locked in. I can wind up my pension, say it's $1 million, go back to RSPs. I got $1 million there, or minus whatever tax. But then I could also withdraw the money. It's not locked in. When you're part of a plan that is registering with the province and the Pension Benefit Act, you're almost losing that connected person status, meaning that you could say, I don't want to be a part of this pension anymore, this SMEP, I want out. Well, when that money transfers out, it doesn't go to an RSP, registered retirement savings plan, that's unlocked, that I could then take money out. It goes to a locked in retirement account, which in the name is locked in. You can't just get access to that money outside of when I want to collect an income. And then they convert to something known as a LIF, or a life income fund, right? So again, you're very committed to the point of, when I'm devoting dollars to this SMEP and I want out at some point, it's going to be locked in. And you can get money in locked in accounts if someone really wants to get technical, like if you're suffering from dire straits, which is very hard to qualify for. But if you were terminally ill, or something going on, you could probably access it. But generally speaking, you're not getting access to that locked in retirement account when you move out.
So inside an MEPP and a SMEPP, because they're registered with the province, they follow different rules, provincial rules. And so it's actually more strict. It's less flexible than an IPP and PPP, because of the fact that if they need to transfer out, they need to transfer out into a locked-in mechanism, either a LIRA, locked-in retirement. What is a LIRA? Locked-in retirement account, or a LIF, a life income
fund. Yeah,
income fund. So those are locked in. The L stands for locked in. Whereas in an IPP, PPP, then you can move back to an RSP, which is not locked in. So in fact, that's another weakness, and it's a major weakness, because you can't predict life, and you can't predict the curveballs that life will throw at you. So we've talked a lot about the pros. We've talked a lot about the weaknesses and the cons. Everybody has to do their own due diligence. Everybody needs to look at their own situation, their own family situation, their own career situation, their own retirement situation, and figure out, are the pros good enough for me, and can I tolerate the cons?
Can I just add this, Vu? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to speak in absolutes here. Now that we've addressed and talked about things that can happen with SMEPs and MEPs and what have you, now you know to ask the questions. Hey, what happens if?
Exactly.
Right? Because every pension can have its own plan text and can have unique things added to it here and there. So just ask the questions. And if you get a wishy-washy answer, ask to see where it's written down, where it says that that's going to play out the way you want it to play out. Because financial instruments and financial products are complex. A lot of times they have a lot of fine print in different places. So make sure you do your due diligence on it, because it is very important to make sure you have a good retirement structure.
I think you brought up a good point. And the point is do your own due diligence and find out. But that's my message. But the message that you're saying is, now that you are armed with education and information, you should be able to ask the intelligent questions. And I think that's what you're saying. And I absolutely agree 150%. Now that you have the knowledge, you are armed to ask the intelligent questions. Do not be persuaded by simplicity. Do not be persuaded by the sticker price. Do not be persuaded by, well, everybody else is doing it, I should. And they've made it so easy for me, it's a no-brainer. I should just sign on this dotted line. No, we should not do that. We should not settle. We should ask the important questions. We should ask the intelligent questions. And at the end of the day, make an educated decision. But it must be educated. It cannot be wishy-washy, because this is your pension. This is your retirement. And this will make or break your career. And I say that with the most genuine intention possible. There's a reason why teachers don't worry about retirement. Because they know they have a really golden safety net to fall on. As physicians, we don't have that. We don't know where we're going to end up. We put in RSPs, and depending on the current of the ocean and the wind and the rise and fall of the market, we have no clue whether we're going to be okay to retire or not. That's not a good safety net. And so building a good pension is building a good safety net. And once you've built a good safety net, everything else you can handle. And that speaks to burnout. And so figuring out the right pension plan for you is one way, not the only way, is one way to combat burnout. The other way to combat burnout is actually get your finances in order. And pension is just one part of the finance, right? There's TFSAs, there's life insurance, there's trust, there's tax planning, there's estate planning, all that. Once you've got your finances, and I mean the whole spectrum of finance, not just pension, once you've gotten that pat down, trust me, you can, as physicians, we can take anything, we can take it on. But if we have to take that on and financial challenges, you're going to burn out, right? For sure. So figuring out the right pension plan is just one step forward in trying to fight burnout or prevent it.
And a pension plan is, like you already mentioned it, Vu. It's not all or nothing. This is one piece of your overall long-term financial planning. And it's not going to cripple you. It's a great piece of the overall plan. It's 30 to 50 grand a year is probably in the range of what you're going to be saving towards a pension plan, 30 to 50,000. So when you think of the earning ability of physicians, you still are going to want to do, or still will probably do, all of those other things. Buying real estate, getting into the rental market, expanding your overall asset allocation. You're going to still do all of those cool things. But yes, the pension plan is going to be a really rock solid foundation if you have the right one for you.
Right. And you know what? At the end of the day, not many people want to do real estate. You know, not everybody wants to do rental income. Not everybody wants a passive income. You know, I know some people who just likes to work and work and work and work and work and work and work until they die. I mean, I know those people, right? So not everybody wants passive income. We all dream of passive income, but not everybody wants to do it. Fair enough. I get it. But having a safety net is a must for everybody, right? So you can have a safety net in an RSP. You can have a safety net in an IPP PPP. You can have a safety net in a MEPP. You can have a safety net in a SMEPP. That's the core. That's the safety net. Now, there are pros and cons of each. We've talked about the pros and cons of this one, of the DB SMEP. And at the end of the day, choose the one that you like that has the pros where you tolerate the cons. Okay. But it's important to understand this. And I want to come back to your point, Nick. The point is this. Now that you are armed with education, ask the intelligent question before you make an educated decision.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for being with us today and talking about this. And again, I want to close the episode with a disclosure because I want everybody to be really clear about this. I am the president of the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. So without a doubt, I'm going to think mine is better, right? Without a doubt. And I created it because I think it is the better one. However, that being said, I think all plans out there are good, and you just need to find the right one. So, Nick, if you want to do your disclosure, please.
Yeah. So I work with VU. I look after financial planning for members that come in and want to work with VU in the CPPP or Canadian Physician Pension Plan. And I help the physicians navigate the world of finances. So I am one that looks at pros and cons. I'm always a pro con, and I allow you to make that decision similar to where most physicians are in medicine. You're not going to come in with a black and white thing and say, do this, do that. You're going to make sure that you disclose all that needs to be disclosed. So I work with VU. I think that individual pension plans, personal pension plans, in most cases are more advantageous for most people, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily right for everybody.
And Nick is the head of financial planning and insurance solutions at the Canadian Physicians Pension Plan. So just wanted to add that to make sure we completely disclose our conflict of interest here. Okay, thank you very much, Nick. And to the audience, à la prochaine. So now that we disclose all our conflict of interest, I would like to prolong this podcast a little bit longer by saying, well, you guys already know that I do financial mentorship for individuals who want to know more about financial literacy and how to plan for financial security. Now I have gotten my certificate in coaching. So not only do I do financial mentorship, I now offer the service of coaching in executive and leadership. And so if you are interested in coaching, which is very different from mentorship, but you want to develop yourself, develop self-agency, awareness, build your capability and capacities, then coaching is what you should consider and think about. So if you are interested in that service of coaching, executive and leadership coaching, please reach out to me. And you know how, at hmfhd2020@gmail.com. So I am launching this individual personal coaching services for all healthcare professionals. So let me know if you are interested and send me an email. Ciao.
How is My Financial Health Doc podcast is hosted by Dr. Vukit Tran. Dr. Tran is a physician with a special interest in personal financial security and wealth education. Dr. Tran does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through this financial podcast. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. Please confer with your advisor, lawyer, or accountant for specific advice.